So guys, finally, the National Green Tribunal has given the green signal to develop the Great Nicobar project, which is a 92,000 ambitious project which is trying to totally transform the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands. Mainly, this project has been in the news on and off for the last 2 years because there were various environmental challenges and the concerns, and that is where India's topmost judicial authority, which is specialized in looking at environmental cases, forest protection, and also looking at various environmental compensation issues, the National Green Tribunal has finally agreed that this project has a larger strategic interest because we are trying to totally transform the Indian Ocean region and also trying to counter China here. So that is why, considering its strategic ambitions and also the environmental safeguards that the central government is trying to propose, the Green Tribunal has finally agreed that okay, this project should be going forward in the national interest. Now, when we try to decipher this topic from the absolute basics, we have to start from the prelims perspective firstly, by looking at the geographical aspects. Now guys, whenever we are talking about some PYQs like this, 2018 and 2017, if you can understand that they are asking that which of the following is geographically closest to the Nicobar Island. Also, when we talk about some specific geographical features such as volcanoes, we know that the Barren Island volcano, right, is present in that region. And also, if you look at this 2018 PYQ, they are trying to confuse you in statement number 1 and statement number 2. Firstly, they are telling that okay, Barren Island volcano is an active volcano. Second, they are telling that the last time the Barren Island volcano erupted was in 1991. So don't you think that they are contradictory in nature? So that is why let me know what is the answer in the comments below. So we have around 836 islands and only around 31 of them are inhabited by human beings. Mainly we have a large section of the indigenous tribal populations living there for centuries and even for thousands of years. Also, if you can look into the location of the main capital city of Port Blair and the distance of Port Blair from mainland cities such as Kolkata, Visakhapatnam and Chennai, you find that Kolkata is actually closest to Port Blair. Also, another surprising fact is that even areas such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, they are much more closer than our own mainland India. So you understand that Andaman and Nicobar Islands are almost kind of an extension of India, which is much more to the eastern part. So that means in the Indian Ocean region, to establish our strategic dominance, we have to develop this part in a very expedited manner. And that is where we understand the main significance is that we share maritime borders with Indonesia, Myanmar and Thailand in the region. Also, when we talk about the biodiversity aspects here, we find that 95% of the island is covered by tropical rainforests. And in fact, the Andaman Nicobar Islands is actually part of the larger Sundaland biodiversity hotspot, which is actually taking into the various islands of Indonesia and even Andaman and Nicobar Islands when we talk about the huge natural biodiversity that we find here. And that is why these islands are also known as living libraries. So you should be including these terms in your mains examination. Now, when we talk about the project finally, we understand that this project will be totally transforming the Nicobar Island, which is the southern sections of the island. Now, the main implementing agency of this project will be the Andaman and Nicobar Islands Integrated Development Corporation, which has been set up, especially for looking into the implementation of the projects here. And this will be costing around 92,000 crore as of 2026 numbers. Now, what all will be included as a part of this project? Firstly, a transshipment port. Transshipment ports are actually much more important and more advanced versions of the ports that we normally have. Now, these ports have mega terminals. These ports have extended and very big areas for cargoes so that many ships can come, and also these ships are much more advanced, almost like the Colombo port that we have in Sri Lanka, or say when we talk about India developing to the likes of Hong Kong and Singapore. This is where we are trying to achieve the same. Also, there will be an international airport where it will be a dual use one, civilian and defense forces both can use it. Also, power plants will be set up. Initially, we will be using fossil fuels by powering gas and various other thermal coal based power plants gradually over the period of time. Mainly the objective is to move on to the renewable energy, that is promoting solar energy there, because we do not want to actually commit a lot of fossil fuel based pollution there, right? Also, at the end of the day, there will be townships, and here as of now there are around 8,000 people living in the islands there, but over a period of time we should be housing around 3.5 lakh people. Why? Because all of these sections of the population will be working at the port, at the airport, power plants. Also, we are trying to promote tourism, so we have to build more hotels, resorts and various other restaurants and so many other infrastructure. So all these projects we have talked about, the port, the airport, mainly if you can actually map it on the Great Nicobar Island, if you find that these projects are located along the coastal side, because to the north we have two national parks, the Campbell Bay National Park and the Galathea National Park, and that is exactly why we have to understand that whatever strategic development is going to take place is concentrated heavily in the southern sections. Now, the National Green Tribunal has approved this project mainly in the national interest, because firstly, when we talk about developing this region as a whole, we had this idea firstly in the 1970s when India and China just came out of a war and India faced numerous defeats. So India was also worried that if China would corner India on the Indian Ocean region or not. Now this idea was not slated on for decades. Finally in 2022, and after that period of time, after even the Niti Aayog proposed this project, we came up with funding to the tune of 92,000 crore. Environmental clearance was granted in 2022, and here there were so many safeguards which were proposed by the government of India that we are also going to look at in the very end. Now understand that strategically, if you look at the Nicobar Islands here, they are highly close to the Indonesian region and most importantly the Strait of Malacca, where around 30 to 40% of the entire global trade happens. Major shipments of crude oil and so many other exports of goods take place through this region. So naturally, the areas in and around this region are actually quite prosperous, because mainly the business houses and the local merchants, they benefit a lot in offering the various services to the ships passing nearby. And that is why maybe if we can develop the same in this region too of our country, we will also be developing the same. So the Straits of Malacca, Sunda and Lombok are actually highly strategically important. So important that more than 70% of Chinese exports and imports pass through this region. So naturally China will be very interested. So that is why China is building various sophisticated military facilities at the Coco Island, for example, in Myanmar. Right? Actually, if you can understand, this is the Coco Island that we are talking about. And China is trying to invest a lot because China wants to make the various imports and exports of their country secure in this region. Apart from this, China is also sending various vessels, ships to the Indian Ocean region, because it becomes very naughty sometimes by thinking that it will actually provoke India by taking some action or attacking Chinese ships and so on. Because China loves to go in conflicts with various countries. If you look at the South China Sea or even the conflict that China has with Japan, so and also the same that we have with China along the entire northern border of our country, China always loves keeping various other countries in conflict itself. So this will be the project to counter that particular aspirations. And mainly when we talk about bringing in the overall regional connectivity in this particular Indian Ocean region and also the overall Pacific region, we are talking about our Southeast Asian neighboring countries also. So if we develop this region itself, if we try to have a transshipment port and also various tourism services, we will be having a better version of Act East policy, where we are trying to promote more and more good relations on economic, military and even when we talk about a people-to-people contact. Finally, at the end of the day, various experts also suggest that if we go on to redevelop this project itself, we can actually discover various oil reserves and also the various deep sea minerals, right? Because the Indian Ocean region is actually highly rich in such minerals, but definitely there are some concerns. So the first concern is actually about the local people. Now, when we try to discuss this, firstly look at the 2019 question regarding the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, because there is one tribal community known as the Shompen. Now the Shompens have been living in these islands for thousands of years. In fact, they are actually known as one of the earliest residents of Indian subcontinent itself. Now, when we try to displace them just in the name of some infrastructural project, it actually goes against our ethics. Now, when we talk about this question itself, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups actually are those tribal sections where they follow centuries old and sometimes even thousands of years old cultural traditions, social traditions in such a way that they are actually much more socially backward than the mainland India. Now, when we talk about the mainstream India, we have better literacy rates, we have better health outcomes, but these groups are totally isolated from us. So even a small infection can totally wipe out the entire tribal sections there. So if you know the answer to this PYQ, let me know in the comments below. So that is why, let us go back to the topic here. This displacement of these local tribal sections is a cause of concern. Firstly, on an ethical level. Secondly, on a legal level, we understand that the Forest Rights Act of 2006 ensures that the tribal sections of the population and also the various other forest dwellers, they are entitled to their land rights, provided that they have been resident in the region for various time period. And that is where we understand that Shompen are naturally entitled to various land titles and land records. Despite that, the Gram Sabha in that region is overpowered by such projects in national interests. So definitely we understand that the government of India is telling that the tribal consent was approved. But experts tell that the consent which was given by the tribal councils was maybe not obtained in a very fair manner. Maybe initially the tribal council actually gave no objection to this project, but later on the tribal council themselves revoked that because they gradually understood the larger evils of the project themselves for their own local survival. Now the next concern is ecological in nature, because this project will be leading to the deforestation of 1 million trees, and we already have known that 95% of the islands are covered with tropical evergreen forests. So these forests are actually one of the most dense regions of our country where we actually get a lot of our oxygen supply to. The second concern is actually the survival of these leatherback turtles. You understand that these giant leatherback turtles are actually one of the largest turtle species on the earth. Now what happens that during their breeding season, hundreds of turtles come onto the coasts of the Great Nicobar Island and they lay their eggs in their nests, right? So this massed nesting will be disrupted. What will happen to those turtles? Also, what will happen to all of these species, as you can understand? So this is the Nicobar megapod, right? Also we have the Nicobar long-tail macaque in this region. Also we find the Robert crab. We are finding new species as of November 2025. We found a new wolf snake species. So God knows how many new species are there in the island right now. If these projects go on, it will lead to their destruction. Now the next concern in economics and also legal aspects. Firstly, the experts themselves tell that we are expecting that that the Great Nicobar Island will be kind of a substitute for the Malacca Straits and all those regions. But still, the project is not yet developed. We do not have understanding if at all the various international shipping companies will be using our islands or not for various shipping concerns, or even if there will be lots of tourists in the region or not. Next, we also have seen that over a period of time, initially the project cost was around 72,000 crore. Now it is around 92,000 crore. So this means that costs are increasing, and also if you are building some projects on some island areas of our country, it actually costs more, because if you build some projects in Delhi, in Mumbai and various other cities, it is much more easier because supplies are near, raw material you can easily get, but those things you have to transport to the islands and that doubles the cost. Also, the budget has increased 20% in 4 years. That means more taxpayers' money is actually going into this kind of projects which are only getting costlier day by day. Also, for example, most of the projects and most of the various infrastructure that will take place here will be developed by taking loans from the banks. Now, various economic experts themselves are telling that the interest costs will be much more than the revenue, at least in the initial few years. That means in the initial few years, it would be maybe at the public expense, where the government can actually go on to do some viability gap funding. This means that 60% of the cost will be given by Government of India and 40% will be given by the private sector. Why, if you may ask? Because simply remember this thing, that if you are constructing some projects in islands, it will take double the cost, and if there are double costs, private sector will not be interested in spending 100% of the money, and that is why the government will tell, okay, that project is actually important for national significance, so let me contribute some money, but all of this money will be going from the taxpayers' money. Now the next issue is actually with reference to the various legal issues that we face. For example, if you actually understand that the coastal areas of our country are very ecologically sensitive. On the coast we have various amounts of natural resources such as coastal forests, deltas, and that is why the Government of India, in consultation with the state governments also, actually regulate some zones. Now in these zones you cannot do a lot of human-made activities such as big buildings or various mega infrastructural projects. So based on that, we have the coastal regulation zones tailored for the islands. Now you know guys that on our islands, for example, on the coasts themselves, during high tides, the waters maybe generally reach up to this level, and during low tides the water will be reaching up to this level. Now this is where you understand that in this middle region there can be some small ports that can be developed, some jetties and some erosion control structures, for example, to prevent illegal sand mining. Now these are known as the CRZ-1B regions. CRZ-1 regions are those regions which are actually filled with, for example, mangroves, coral reefs. Now these need a 50-meter buffer zone. That means that if you are building some ports on some CR1 zones, it is totally prohibited. If you can actually build one on CRZ-1B, then you are actually allowed to do some small port jetties and etc. Now, what the government did, according to various ecological experts, government rushed various clearances in these CRZ-1 zones which were classified as CRZ-1B zones. You understand, right? That the government is overnight trying to change the definition of these regions itself according to various activists. And on this region, we are trying to have a port, airport, defense township and various other township areas, right? And this is actually leading to the various destruction of the local natural environment, because initially they were the CRZ-1 region. They are not these regions in this particular matter. Also, at the end of the day, this region is prone to various natural disasters. No one can ever forget the 2004 tsunami that took place, and even the recent Myanmar earthquake which took place in 2025, because this region is very close to the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is actually a long continuous, semicircular chain of volcanoes and various fragile tectonic plates. So this is exactly why if we do some mega projects such as this can also upset the plates underneath the oceans, and maybe there can be various natural catastrophe in the region itself. So in this backdrop, now let us actually look into what would be the way forward in this matter. Firstly, there can be an appeal at the Supreme Court under the special leave petition under Article 136, because the National Green Tribunal has given the green signal. Right? Now there will be an appeal to the Supreme Court in this matter. So maybe the Supreme Court will be now looking at the environmental clearances, also looking into the classification of this coastal regulation zone, also into the various displacement of the people under Forest Rights Act. Now also we need a phase gate model. For example, we have to develop the islands in a phase-way manner. We cannot develop the airport, the port all at once. Let us firstly, for example, develop the port. Then if there are some concerns, we will be developing the airport at a much more slower pace. So that is why a phase gate model is important. Next, Also, we should be following the Champagne policy of not interfering in their day-to-day lives too much, because even a small infection can wipe out their entire community. So that is how we should be totally be dedicated with reference to their own displacement. Also, we have a huge island carrying capacity cost due to such projects. That is why a framework must be brought in, wherein all the various costs and the benefits should be factored in. And this we can actually follow the Niti Aayog framework. Next, for this project itself and the various other environmental projects, we have to have a eco watchdog committee. Now this committee will be looking into in detail, consisting from various experts' advice as to whether such projects should be going forward or not. For example, the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands fall under zone 5, vulnerability to earthquakes, and that is where we should be also adhering to the various building codes, the norms of such regions. Next, we should be adhering to National Green Tribunal's order, which went for strict compliance. That means that if there would be deforestation, we should be doing compensatory afforestation, and most probably that will take place in Haryana and Madhya Pradesh. Also, we have to understand that much land is not available, and that is why we are doing the same in other states. Next, the coral translocation has been advised by the NGT. Whatever coral displacement will happening, it should be again replanted in various other sections of the particular islands. Next, a turtle conservation plan must be done. So this was all for this article. Now we have a mains practice question for all of you. We will now move on to the next one.